Hello students, welcome for our today lessons. We are going to explore on the earth in the universe, and we shall be narrowing it down to what we call discovering the planet. In the previous lesson, we had looked at the solar system shortly, over which we were actually to proceed and focus into it so that we get clear information about the solar system and move on. Now, from the previous lesson, we look at the planet as an astronomical body that is orbiting the star or a stellar remnant. And we learned that it is a massive enough and is rounded in a manner that it can be visible. Therefore, from that, I will make a short preview on a statement I will be looking at. All planets revolve around the sun, and they revolved in an elliptical manner. For example, we'll consider the solar system as we'll be able to define it. Previously, we learned that the solar system is composed of several planets and other heavenly bodies that are orbiting. They are in constant orbit around the sun in a clockwise manner. And from the discovery, we'll be able to learn about the solar system today, and we move on to the next part. Now, the solar system is made up of the planets and the other heavenly bodies that revolve around the sun. Therefore, today we'll look at the several planets that are found in the solar system. We mention them beginning from the sun because it is one of the heavenly body. We will also have what we call, we have Mercury, we have Venus, then we have the Earth, we have Mars, we have Jupiter, we have Saturn, and Neptune. We have Saturn, Neptune. There's also one, we call it Uranus. Uranus and Neptune. These are the most discovered planets that are in the solar system. Beginning from the sun, initially we looked at the sun as the star. It's parts of the star that is found in the solar system. There are also various explanations about the orientation of the solar system. We shall look at it in the next lesson. But today, when we begin from Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, and then we have Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. These are the powerful planets that have been observed, and they are accredited by scientists that right now they exist in our solar system. Among these planets, we also have other heavenly bodies, of which I will just mention them, but we shall be able to look at them later as we move on. Other heavenly bodies, I had mentioned about the star. We also have the moon. We also have the metals. And then we have the meteorites, meteoroids. Then we have comets. These are also other heavenly bodies that can also be found in the solar system. Now, let's move on, and then we look at the planets shortly, and then we shall be able to learn as we move. As we know, planets, from the information that we already have, planets do not make their own light. They reflect much of the light from the stellar component, that is the that is the sun. They reflect much light from the sun. Planets do not make their own light, but they receive light from the sun and also reflect it in other various areas. And most of the planets, they are the ones that make up the solar system, as we have already seen, such as the Sun, Venus, Mercury, Earth, Mars. When you observe them closely, they are very close to the Sun. And because Mercury, we have Venus, and then we have Earth and Mars. These planets are very close to the Sun, and the essence of them being closer to the Sun, they are known as terrestrial. They are known as terrestrial. They are known as terrestrial planets. Why? Because they are Earth-like. When you look at Mercury closely and Venus, they almost look like the Earth, although they vary in size and shape. All the same with the Mars, with the planet Mars. We'll be able to explore them in details as we move. Now, all these planets, some of them are rocky, and they have a hard surface, especially Mercury, Venus, and Mars. They are relatively closer to the Earth, and they are often seen in the sky as bright points of light. Most of these planets, Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars, they are seen in the night sky. When the skies are very clear, they are able to be seen. But now, for us to be able to look them into the sky, we have to use a special instrument that is called the telescope. The first telescope was discovered by the scientist Galileo Galilei, who invented the first telescope, and he used it to study the heavens and in the universe. And then he discovered there are some objects that Jupiter has got 4 moons. Galileo is the one who discovered using a scientific tool called telescope. Today we can also be able to look at it, but we have to develop a sophisticated telescope so that we are able to explore into the space and be able to analyze what is it found here. Now, we have seen by the help of the telescope, we will be able to know and see the planets. We will be able to know and see the planets as the bright points in the night sky. They are bright points in a clear night sky. Most of these planets can be seen when you have a powerful telescope in a very clear sky. For example, we have Mercury and Venus. They are always visible before the dawn. We have the planet called Mercury and Venus. These planets are able to be seen. When you use a telescope, you'll be able to see them. They are visible in the night sky, and especially at the dawn. You see them at dawn, and they appear just, most of them appear just either after the sunset or before the dawn. Now, like Mercury, is mostly observed in the sky as a bright point star that is giving out much more light compared to other stars. When you are able to see at the sky, when it is very clear, and it is also referred to as the morning star. Mercury is referred as to the morning star because you are able to see it. Like today, I observed in the sky, and I was able to see a star that was giving out the bright light. We call it the morning star. We call it the morning star because it gives the bright light in the sky among other stars. But it is not really a star, it is the planet called Mercury. And then when we come to the Venus, Venus is seen just after the sunset, and it's referred to as the evening stars, evening star. It is referred to as evening star. It is mostly seen after the sunset. Just some few minutes after the sunset, and it appears sometime as a red colored star. It has got this characteristic. When you observe it, it appears as a red colored star when you look into it in the sky. This is its main characteristic, especially of the Venus, that which appears as an evening star just some few minutes after the sunset. And it also to show some bright red colored light. Therefore, it gives it a red colored star, although it is not a star. That we'll be able to look at it. Now, allow us also to move into when we are being able to look at these very few planets. There are also other heavenly bodies that we refer to them as constellations. We refer to them as constellation. These are just a group of stars that are found in the space or in the universe. And they also have some role they play. They have some roles they play because we have learned that a star gives out light, and then the planet will receive part of the light, either can reflect it to the other planet, or it can just have its brightness from that. A constellation is a group of stars that have varied patterns. And most of the stars, when we are able to look at them, very clearly, when you observe in the sky, you will see a group of stars making different patterns into the sky. And that one has given us an interest that as scientists, we look at it very careful, and then we are able to know and understand what is happening into the space. For example, most of these grouped stars, they can be seen in the sky and they can be seen all year around. For example, in the southern hemisphere, we are able to see a group of stars that is known as the Southern Cross. It is referred to as Southern Cross. And it is found in the southern hemisphere. It is found in the southern hemisphere, clearly into the sky, all year around. You are able to find this group of stars that is referred to as Southern Cross. Southern Cross appears, when you observe it into the sky, it appears to have either 5 or 6 stars. 5 or 6 stars that are grouped together, and they make different patterns. For example, this is a pattern of a star. Now, as we had seen earlier, we have seen a group of stars that is on constellation. They have varied patterns and they can be seen in the sky, and some of them are spread all year around. Especially I had cited, I'm citing that in the southern hemisphere, we have a group of stars that is known as Southern Cross. Southern Cross. Southern Cross is a group of stars that make a pattern into the sky and can easily be seen all year round in the southern hemisphere. And for this reason, most of the countries, they have their national flags bearing the patterns of this class of stars that is called Southern Cross. And most of these countries include the country of Australia. We have Papua New Guinea, and also we have the Samoa. These are the countries that when you look at their flags, their national flags bear the pattern of the stars. And that one is an identity that these countries, they are located in the southern parts of the equator. Therefore, we'll be able to look at other heavenly bodies away from this. We have other heavenly bodies. Other heavenly bodies that we are able to see them as I had mentioned earlier. We have the stars, we have the planets, and other heavenly bodies. We have looked a bit of the stars and the constellation that are able to be seen clearly in the sky, and mostly in the southern countries of the equator. Their national flags bear the patterns of the Southern Cross for easy identification. Let's look at the other heavenly bodies, such as we have the moon and the artificial satellite. We have one, the artificial satellite. Artificial satellites are the man-made bodies or man-made celestial bodies which are placed in orbit, and they go around the Earth, can also go around the moon or another planet in order to collect information. They are basically placed in the space for the purpose of collecting information. We call them the artificial satellite. They are a man-made body or celestial body that are placed in the orbit around the Earth or the moon. They can also go around another planet in order to collect information. For example, the ICS, which is an international space. The ICS, which is an international space station, an international space station, have placed various celestial body into the space. Some of them can easily be seen by the telescope, and others can just be seen by the naked eyes in the sky, moving into the space either of the planet Earth, we call it the atmosphere, or they can move in another planet. Most of them, they have their light that is reflected from sunlight that enable them to be seen by our naked eyes. For example, the satellite that has been placed by international space societies, because it has what you call the sunburn solar, it has got a lot of light that it reflects back onto the Earth, and people on Earth's surface can be able to see their brightness, and those objects, they are moving into the space for the purpose of collecting information. The light we see is reflected from sunlight back to us. Where are they placed? Where are these artificial satellites placed? They are placed in the space, in the orbit, according to their size, altitude, and also the size of the satellite itself. Let us look at the size. We look at the size and the altitude where they are placed of the satellites. As we have seen, satellites vary in size and shape. Some are very small. They can take as small as even 10 centimeters, while others can take around 20 centimeters. They are large in size. Therefore, we have different sizes of the artificial satellites. Others are 50 meters. Others are even larger. For example, the largest satellite that has been placed by the ICS is the one that is very large. It takes about 50 meters. That is its size. And when it is launched into the space, it is given a certain orbit over which it goes round and round, so that as it collects information, either mostly this information that are collected can be either involving what you call the weather information, or just information from other planets or on the surface of the Earth, so that people may be able to know what is going on. Now, there are three common orbits which satellites operate in. There are common orbits over which the satellites operates in, and those orbits will determine the size the altitude and also the size of the satellite over which they are operating. We have three common orbits. There are three common orbits over which the satellites operate. The first orbit that we have, it is called the low Earth orbit. The low Earth orbit. You can use this initial to remember it very fast. It is referred to as the low Earth orbit. And this orbit has an altitude that ranges between 200, that is 200 kilometers. For example, the satellite that orbits in this place, the orbit is placed at 400, ranges between 200 to 400 kilometers with a speed, and the satellite operates there with a speed of 28,000, that is 28,000 kilometers per hour, and it mostly takes around 90 minutes to complete that orbit. Therefore, the first orbit that has been used, it is called the low Earth orbit, and most of the satellites that has been placed here, it is also it is referred to as the International Space Station. That is a satellite that is placed in the low Earth orbit, orbiting at an altitude ranging between 200 kilometers to 400 kilometers, and the satellite itself in this altitude takes about 28,000 kilometers per hour. That is the speed over which this satellite moves on, and it equally takes around 90 minutes to complete that revolution, or to complete its one path in that, as it gathers information. Let's move to the second orbit. We have looked at the low Earth orbit. The second orbit is the medium Earth orbit. Medium Earth orbit, can use that acronyms to remember. It is the second level of orbit over which the satellite operates, and this one ranges between 20,000 kilometers from the surface of the Earth, and this satellite that is placed in this altitude takes around 12 hours. 12 hours to complete one orbit as it moves. And most of the satellites that are found in this altitude of orbit, they normally deal with the information of weather. For example, you visit the meteorological department, they will have to gather all information about weather and then giving about information about the climate of given regions and the area. Therefore, also the meteorological department have their satellite that is mostly centered in this altitude, and that is where the satellites can operate. And then lastly, we have what we call the geostationary Earth orbit. That is the orbit number 3. Geostationary Earth orbit. Geostationary Earth orbit. This kind of orbit is now the one that is mostly inhabited by the International Space System, where very huge satellites operate here. Now, the satellite that we have been able to see, the largest satellite that takes about 50 meters, is the one that is placed in this orbit, that is referred to as geostationary Earth orbit, because it takes more information and it gathers information mostly around 1 year, so that it remits, and it normally gathers information for the next year, That is now where we'll find that the military operation, for example, of the USA, they have their satellite placed at the geostationary Earth orbit, and this one cannot be easily seen by the naked eye because they have an altitude that is placed around 36,000 and above. 36,000 kilometers from the Earth's surface, and this one is the higher altitude, where now, because of the excess light that is found in the space, our ordinary eyes cannot withstand and be able to peep in to the kind of the satellites that are placed at this altitude, unless we are assisted by the telescope, and mostly at night, because the light has reduced. Our eyes also require some certain percentage of light, so that we are able to see those satellites. And this one takes 24 hours. The satellite that is placed in the geostationary Earth orbit takes 24 hours to complete one orbit, and mostly it is used for the communication of weather. It gathers information about weather, climate, and also the military operation. For example, if they want to focus about the coming weather in 5 or 3 years to come, they are able to use this one. This is the most reliable satellite that can give more information. That is much more about the 3 common orbits over which the satellite operates in. Let's move on. Therefore, we'll be able to look at the types of satellites. Also, there are various types of satellites here. I want us to explore this part, and then we will quickly move to the next. Types of satellites. We have various types of satellites that are also placed in the orbit for the purpose of gathering information. And earlier on, we have been able to see an orbit is just a celestial body that is man-made, and it is placed into the space or in the orbit around the Earth, the Moon, or another planet for the purpose of collecting information. Therefore, there are various types of satellites. One of the satellites that we have, we call them the navigation satellites. And the navigation satellites are made up of 24 satellites that are orbiting at an altitude of around 20 kilometers high above the sea level, and they have different signals that they received from the calculation of the extent. They are mostly used as the GPS. This type of satellite are the ones that are used to calculate the location of regions, the altitude of the location of the regions. But they are in one group of, we call them the navigation satellites. They have different signals that they receive, and those signals that are received, they are used to calculate the location of the GPS near the Earth's surface. Now, this one can easily be found, especially now we are in a technological world where some phones, they have GPS enabled. That means they are able to collect some signals from the navigation satellites, and in particular area, wherever you are, they will help you to calculate the location of that region, especially near the Earth. And they are referred to as the navigation satellite. Most of the time, there are different countries that are using them. Therefore, they are a group of 24 satellites. They are placed here for the purpose of calculation of the GPS or the location of regions on Earth's surface. If you are very careful, you have a smartphone, go in it and then find the location of your region, because they will be, your phone is enabled to collect information from the navigation satellites, which receives signals in a twinkling of a minute. They'll be able to tell you in the locations where you are. For example, you are found in Nairobi. Exact estate, it will be established by calculation of the location of that area that is near the Earth's surface and tell you at which GPRS are you found. And mostly they are written as longitude and latitudes. That is an order in which they are used to tell us. For example, it can be longitude 34 degrees and then latitude 25, and then some minutes are located there. This is the GPRS calculation that can easily be found in certain areas, and that is about the navigation satellites. They are used for that purposes. We have the next one. It is referred to as the communication satellite. Communication satellite. Communication satellites are mainly used for the televisions, the phone, internet, and other communication transmission. For example, the Optus. It is called the Optus 01. Is a communication satellite that is placed in geostationary satellite. This one is placed in the geostationary orbit above the equator, and it has got a large coverage of the first print that it provides signals to all the countries around Australia and New Zealand. The Optus 01 is a communication satellite that is placed in a geostationary orbit, and it covers a large area where it gathers more signals and information around these countries that are called Australia and New Zealand for the purpose of gathering information concerning that area. That is about the communication satellite. I've given an example. They are placed around the equator. That is the area where they are placed, and they are placed in a geostationary orbit. Geostationary orbit. Another type of satellite is called the weather satellite. The weather satellite. The weather satellite. From the word weather, this is a type of a satellite that is placed into the space, especially the low Earth orbit. It gathers more information about the weather, and this is used to provide the imagery of the clouds. It measures the temperatures, measures the amount of rainfall in a particular area, and therefore it is able to send these signals on the meteorology. In the meteorology department, where all weather forecasts are done. And this type of satellite mostly gathers information about the imagery of the clouds. It is able to take the image of the types of the clouds here, and here, basing on that satellite, it is powerful in such a manner that it is able to expose the types of the clouds here. And from the analysis of the weather, we'll be able to look at the different types of the cloud. Later, it is also able to measure the temperature across the zone over which it is placed to orbit, and also able to measure amount of rainfall. This is the work that is done by the weather satellite, by the meteorological department, where all the weather forecasting is done. And this type of satellite is able to gather information and signals about the imagery of the clouds. It detects the statistics of the temperature, the average amount of temperature in a particular month. It can be recorded and sent to the radar stations, and also be able to find out the amount of rainfall in particular regions. Therefore, it helps the weather people or weatherman to be able to know the weather condition of particular regions over a given period of time, and they are able to give out observation about the weather. The last type of satellite is referred to as the Earth observation satellite. That is the Earth observation satellite. Thank you. The Earth observation satellite. This is the last type of satellite, and it is placed for the purpose of observing the features or the phenomena on Earth. That is most of the shape of the earth. We look at its features. Sometime this type of satellite is able to study about the global winds, the winds pattern. And for that purpose, it gives us more information about the earth. Mostly when we consider the shape of the earth and its features, and also sometimes the global winds that are found affecting part of the earth. That one we shall be able to look at it when we look into the next lesson about the global climate. We'll be able to explore about the climate, the global winds pattern and how they are affecting the earth. Those are types of the satellites. We are able to look at them. Lastly, we have other heavenly bodies. We are still exploring other heavenly bodies. We have been able to look at the satellites, the types of satellites, and we have other heavenly bodies that include metas. We have metas. A meta is a small glowing heavenly body that enters into the earth atmosphere mostly at a high speed, and this one may burn up and disappear because of the frictional drag. Because of the frictional drag that it encounters into the space. For example, take time and look into the sky, especially at night, when you are able to see it clearly. You'll be able to see a streak of light like shooting at a very high speed, and sometimes as it shoots up, it burns up because it has met the oxygen into the atmosphere. Going against the frictional drag, it burns up quickly because oxygen is an agent that supports burning very fast. Therefore, it burns up within a streak of seconds and then disappear. And sometimes, if this small body does not burn up completely, it may reach the earth's surface where human beings are, and it can create a depression, sometimes depending on how large it is. That is much more about the meta, a heavenly glowing body that enters into the earth's atmosphere at a streak of light. It normally produces a streak of light just shortly, and then you look at that light, it looks like a spear. This is where the meta point is. All these others are the streak of light. From the space that is entering, meeting the frictional drag of oxygen, it is able to burn up quickly and disappear. That is about the meta, which is one of the heavenly body. And then there is another one that is called a meteoroid. A meteoroid. A meteoroid is a fragment of matter that splits from the path of the orbit, can be in the solar system, and move at a very high speed. It may be able to reach the Earth's surface because it is in form of the fragment. And when it lands on Earth's surface, you look at it, it has some rocky structure. It bears what you call the rocky structure. And in the earlier years, around 1985, there was a meteoroid that landed in Africa, that is in Ghana. It created something like a depression. And over years, that depression up to today, it is there. It has filled up with some water, and then it has formed what we call a meteoroid, or a meta lake. We call them meteoroid lake. That is a feature that is existing on Earth's surface as a result of this fragment coming from meteoroid, spinning up to a high speed, and when it fails to burn up completely, it lands on Earth's surface, and because of the rocky structure, the tension at which it produces, it creates a depression on Earth's surface. And over a period of time, if the region is situated in a temperate climate, we'll be able to gather some water in it, and they will form a lake. They will be able to form a lake. Then we also have a last part. We have the asteroid as one of the heavenly body, and then we also have the comet. The asteroid is a planet-like object that orbits between the sun. It is placed between the sun. It normally orbits between the sun and planet Mars and Jupiter, and they appear in an irregular. They appear in an irregular shape when you observe them in a telescope, but mostly they are found themselves orbiting between sun. We have planet Mars, and we also have Jupiter. That is where they orbit. We refer to them as asteroid, and when you look at them very carefully by a powerful or sophisticated telescope, you will be able to see a rocky structure that look at like an irregular shape orbiting around the sun between planet Mars and Jupiter. There are several of them. They can be around 3 to 4, and they orbit in a different manner around the sun. They are found between planet Mars and Jupiter. Let's look about the comet. Comet is also another heavenly body that orbits around the sun and it is constant. It is made up of the frozen gases. Frozen gases. It is made up of the frozen gases, and it also comprises some ice and dust. As part of the heavenly body, when you remember the origin of the universe, that is the Big Bang Theory, it is a reminder that the dust that made up of the nebulae was part of the beginning of the universe, and therefore comet has taken most of these particles that are frozen gases, ice and particles, and as it orbits around the sun, just like the planets do, but it takes longer period. It can take around 298 light years for it to complete one revolution around the sun, and we are able to look at them. Therefore, we have been able to look at them. We are discovering the Earth in the space, and we have been able to look at the planets. We have looked at the constellation, the other heavenly bodies, and we have measured, especially to look at the type of the planets, types of the satellites, and the orbit where these satellites operate in, their altitudes, and the shape. We have also been able to look at other heavenly bodies such as the asteroids, the comet, and also the meteoroids, which are part of the heavenly body. Those are part of the heavenly bodies that comprises the solar system among the other 8 planets that now we already know. I would like to draw you into the attention of this question as we wind up. The first question is that you state the 8 planets that you have discovered. And then the second question is about you name the 3 countries name the countries where the Southern Cross constellation appears. And then lastly, explain Explain 4 types of satellites. As you brainstorm to discover what you have been able to cover up in this lesson, then after you have been able to understand, then we'll be able to move and continue in the next lesson about the space. Then we'll be now narrowing down to specific planets and their characteristics. Thank you. I hope you have enjoyed the lesson. Welcome.